There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Nuance, where we're seeking to be faithful in the public square. I'm Case Thorpe, and so glad to be with you. Please like and subscribe. You know, when you share these episodes on your social media or with a friend, it really helps us out to spread the word and to grow. So if you've been listening the last couple episodes, you know it's a new day for the collaborative. We've taken our focus on faith and work, and we've kind of expanded the lens, if you will, to our impact in the public square and the greater culture. But of course, faith and work is still a key part of that. And today we're going to talk to a good friend of mine, an artist, and kind of dig into how an artist's work integrates faith and work. So even our show Nuance has been a little nuanced, if you will. We're doing bi-weekly guests on particular topics appropriate to culture and living our faith. But also, you may notice if you subscribed in your feed, we're doing a thing called Nuance Formed for Faithfulness. These are 10-minute episodes dropped each week that help us form our hearts and form them well for the work God has for us. And it follows with the Christian liturgical calendar. So check those out. Well, I am thrilled to have Shawn Welcome here today. Shawn, welcome. Well, Shawn.
Yeah, my whole life.
I welcome you, Shawn Welcome.
I'm grateful to be here, Dr. Case Thorpe. Yeah, man, appreciate the platform.
Well, I have been such a big fan and respect your work so very deeply. The few times we've gotten to work together have been a joy. And so when you agreed to be on today, it was good to hear. Now, I want everybody to know a bit more about you. So can I brag on you?
Sure, go ahead.
Let me brag on you so folks can appreciate Shawn Welcome. So he is a proud Afro-Guyanese American. Now that's a cool term. I want to dig into a little bit that more. But he uses his gift of words to inspire, entertain, and encourage and educate. So he is an expert in a form of art called the spoken word. And I just appreciate and grown to appreciate, really, Shawn, that medium because of you. Now, you're still the Poet Laureate, right, for the city of Orlando?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Like, that's so cool. I didn't know that we had a Poet Laureate. I knew we had one for the country, but that's really cool.
Yeah, no, states, if they decide to adopt one, they can. Cities, likewise, can create a process by which they select their Poet Laureate. And in 2017, the mayor of Orlando decided that Orlando should have a Poet Laureate. And so I'm the second one, who was installed in 2021. So it's a fairly new position, and understandable why people may not even know we have a Poet Laureate, but hopefully through the way I move, that changes and people come to understand there's people that's representing poetry and storytelling and literary arts on behalf of our region. And so each one of us will be different, and we'll have one a few years at a time. And I think it's just better for the city.
So cool. Well, Shawn, though, has done even more than that, and this is partly the reason he is our Poet Laureate. He founded and presently hosts the longest-running weekly open mic in Central Florida called Diverse World. He's the president of Next Level Speakers Academy, which I want to hear more about. Y'all, he has done all kinds of stuff, NBA commercials for the Magic, written and performed at the Orlando Philharmonic, One Pulse Foundation, University of Central Florida, Valencia, Full Sail University, Dr. Phillips Center, Bethune-Cookman University, and so much more. Shawn has a BA in English literature, and hello, that makes so much sense. And you're still working on a master's, right, in sociology.
Yeah, there's a pause button on that. It's one of those unfinished things looming over my head. Halfway through my thesis, I really put my foot on the gas with my speaking career. And so that is an unfinished thing that at some point I'll hop back in and finish.
No, the
Hopefully,
Lord's time.
so.
And married to Jana. And dude, you have 5 children.
Yes, sir.
Like, why?
Why?
I mean,
That's
wow.
funny.
I'm just tired saying 5 children.
Yeah, we
Wow.
juggle a lot here, but we do our best. And
What are their age ranges?
26, 23,
What?
10, 8, and 2.
Dude, you have a 26-year-old?
Yeah. My
You
wife,
look 26.
my wife, I know. My wife was a teen mom. She had 2 very early. Those
Yeah.
kids became my kids when we got married.
Okay.
And then we had 3 more together. So we have a blended family, and that's all of us.
That's really cool. Well, so our listeners, don't mistaken my heart. Like, children are a blessing. They're wonderful. They
He's
just
like,
take a lot.
I am the pastor. I do support.
I know. The family is awesome, but
Ah.
yeah, I've got my
No.
3, and that's enough. Okay, so Afro-Guyanese American. I don't think this is a God thing, but just a few weeks ago, I'm stumbling around on YouTube and I love these little YouTube 12, 20-minute videos on parts of the world I'm just not familiar with. And I watched this whole thing on Guyana and its history and its economy and that sort of thing. But tell us a little bit more about that and your roots.
Yeah, so Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America. Both of my parents are from Guyana, born and raised. Immigrated to the U.S. in the late '70s, early '80s. I was born early '80s, and yeah, growing up in Brooklyn, that's where I was born for the first few years, 7, 8 years of my life. I would visit Guyana in the summers. When I moved to Orlando at about the age of 10, there was a little gap where I was in Jacksonville for a year and a half. But when I moved to Orlando at 10, I would visit New York in the summers. But consistently, like in my household, it was always Guyanese culture in terms of the food, the music,
Mm, mm,
the I don't know. We have our own thing, but you could liken it to like just Caribbean culture in general. So
mhm.
yeah, there's just certain songs we listen to, and certain foods we make at Christmas called pepper pot. We have a tradition of baking bread to go with the pepper pot, so I bake bread and stuff too.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, but
Well, and certainly the seedbed for your work today and those rhythms and the words.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would liken that to Guyanese culture as much as just African American storytelling, that kind of vibe, which, you have the trajectory from oral storytelling to the Harlem Renaissance to hip hop culture to spoken word, where the
Mhm.
emphasis is a lot on tonality, right? And painting these pictures to tell these stories and to kind of use words as a way of communicating effectively, but orally.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, on that note, give us a sense of what is spoken word.
So my definition, my loose definition of spoken word poetry is poetry spoken out loud. So
Okay.
the way I think we conceptualize poetry by and large is through reading it, right? It's on the page. People have structured verses, or even if it's free verse, meaning there is no structure to it, it's just creative words telling a story, expressing your inner world, your outer world, your perspective on life on the page, and it's read. Spoken word poetry, conversely, if that's the right word, is taking that work that's on page and performing it out loud. You're speaking those words, right? So we would just call that spoken word poetry. And there's a whole genre. It's almost like almost a separate genre of arts where you there's the blending of like poetry and theater
Mhm.
together
Mhm.
to communicate whatever it is you're trying to communicate.
So it's not necessarily with rhythm. with emphasis. So if I'm just at a Barnes and Noble literature night and stand up and read Emily Dickinson out loud, would that still qualify as spoken word?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I would say so because it is left the page, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so anytime it leaves the page, to me, it's spoken word. Um, there are some works that have more poetic elements to it than others, right? Like some people would just write content down and say it, and it sounds like you're blogging out loud. But
Mm.
there's,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like poetry per se. Um, so there's like varying degrees of spoken word poetry. Some that are more prose that's just said
Hmm.
out loud, which I guess could be considered spoken word poetry or spoken word. But the to me, the the poetic elements, the creative language
Mm.
combined with saying it out loud is really,
Hmm.
to me, the essence of spoken word poetry.
Okay. Well, and that's what I'm understanding it to be. At the end, friends, we're going to have Shawn do a longer piece. But Shawn, could you just give a little ditty right now so if somebody's not familiar with spoken word, they could get a sense?
Okay. This poem is called Reasons Why, and it's reasons why I like living in Orlando. So it's a short
Okay.
piece like about our hometown.
Okay.
When we say or you see my city beautiful, have you ever asked why? Because visitors might say palm trees have voices of their own, speak for themselves amidst the cotton candy day sky and a rainbow lit night sky. Is it also true for you who reside betwixt the magical water rides? In the cool shadow of the Orlando Eye, Caribbean roots plant well in this soil. They say my city beautiful, but why? Because date night at the Robinson, cocktail vibes, Goff's ice cream still survives, Jeremiah's I got to have because La Chanera and Mi Banderas and Reyes on Orange Ave. At Mamak, I like to meet, or maybe it's me, I like to eat. Roti shops, the seafood station, or Sister Honey's for a treat. We welcome the retirees from the north and from the west, celebrate arts in the street from Immerse to Fusion Fest because the world comes to us. We don't seek validity. Orlando's way too cool to complain about humidity. Wet and wild, we'll never forget you. Slide down Bombay, they loosed you. We don't forget. We honor the past while still embracing the future because innovation's in our veins, because magic, because lions, because growth comes with the sound of the sunrail over the iron, an electrifying region. Resilience could be a tagline because the long lines to give, because our pulse never flatlined, because beauty's beyond visual. When you feel it, you can't deny. So when we say or you see my city beautiful, just remember the reasons why.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that's
I've, I've, I've got
a
Jesus
sampler, I
measles.
guess.
I've got Jesus measles, like goosebumps, dude. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, okay, for the listeners, viewers, go pull back, go rewind this moment and listen to that again. I mean, there's so much visual imagery there of cultural things that we're used to hitting for Orlando residents, but then the overlay of the economy and the people and the food and the culture. Well, thank you. Oh, that was great. So, tell us a little bit about your journey in life and how this artistic expression just became now your full time living.
Yeah, so I was, as mentioned earlier, born in Brooklyn, New York. I moved down to Jacksonville for a year when I was about 8 years old, and then down further to Orlando at about the age of 10. Grew up mostly in Orlando. It was a new place at the time, but, obviously just, acclimated. And the summers I would spend with my dad in New York. My senior year of high school, however, I moved back up to Brooklyn to complete my final year of high school. And it was in that environment that I was in a hyper creative environment. A lot of my classmates and people on my basketball team were all like doing raps and, rapping in ciphers and, it was kind of like this, just a cultural thing that you did or people did. And, it formed crowds and the whole nine. But me being the new kid, again, having no network up there, because most of my network was kind of my social network was formed in Orlando. I was kind of like a blank slate and very impressionable, and, new environment, new school, new friends, like, almost like hit control alt delete, in my mind. And it was a good time for new information to come in for me. And so being in that environment, I asked myself a simple question, like, can I do this? Like what I was seeing, and these were kids
And by
my
the
age.
this, what is the this?
This is right and perform like I was watching my friends do,
Got it.
right? And so I wrote like a little rap thing and showed it to one of my friends and was like, yeah, it's my first time like trying this out. What do you think? And he thought I was joking, thought I was playing around. He was like, oh, you've been writing for, you've been doing this. So I took
Oh,
that as a sign of confidence.
what a
And
surprise.
yeah. And I thought it was good. I don't remember it now, but I thought it was good. And that whole senior year of high school, I just wrote lyrics and brought them back to these settings, right, where people were performing and sharing and stuff like that. And so that's all I did: play ball, write, perform, try to graduate high school, and eventually did. And I brought, after graduating, ended up moving back down to Orlando and started sharing my new talent that I discovered my senior year of high school with my friends on campus. And African American Cultural Society, or A Squared CS, was a program at Valencia College, and they had like an open mic type of showcase thing. And one of my buddies, he was actually just in town yesterday. He's like, Shawn, you need to go up there, man, do your thing, man, share your raps or your lyrics or your whatever. And so I went up. That was the first time I performed in a formal setting, like microphone, audience, whatever. And when I was finished, people responded well to it, right? And so I started looking for other open mic nights around town and started to get connected with a community of people who did that same thing, and became exposed to different styles of writing, different ways to tell stories, different literary devices that people would use to express themselves. And it was the combination of connecting with those friends and exposure to National Poetry Slam, which is a national poetry performance competition, that really opened my mind up to what was possible. And I just kind of nurtured the gift over time, and, the rest is history.
Now, you talked about in high school, you discovered and developed this gift in the midst of your friend set. What about the classroom? Were there any teachers that helped you develop this?
No.
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 Yeah, you didn't go to an English teacher.
No. I don't think spoken word is even like taught in schools like that. It's more form and very Eurocentric in terms of like stylistically, so it just, everything that I learned came from like inspiration from hip hop culture, and kind of like in between the cracks of school,
But
but it has the same like literary value nonetheless, right?
Right.
I teach spoken word poetry workshops presently, and I have a way of kind of introducing that in a more, I guess, structured kind of style. But that's not a knock against English teachers. I'm just answering the question in terms of where I learned what I do from. It was a bunch of no-name 16 and 17-year-olds.
But you did decide English literature for undergraduate study.
I
Was
did.
that because you knew this was your future?
So I was working at 4 high schools at the time, running a program called, I was a counselor for a program called POPS, Professional Opportunities Program for Students. And this is kind of like a mentorship type program, where you introduce certain life skills to those students. I had them dress up every other Wednesday with their shirts. And it was kind of, anyway, at one of those schools, I received such a strong rapport. I'd gotten such a strong rapport with the students that I was working with that the faculty and administrators and teachers noticed and was like, Shawn, you should teach here. Forget the nonprofit, you should teach here. And I was like, I don't have a degree. What are you going to do with that? You going to hire me as a teacher without no bachelor's? And they were like, if you go back to school, we will hire you as a teacher. So that was the inspiration for me going back to school, wanting to have some sort of stability in my life and my growing family and stuff like that. So I went back to school and I was like, I don't want to go to school that has nothing to do with what I'm interested in. So they, at that time, University of Central Florida had English as a major with a creative writing track, right? And so I was like, okay, well, that fits, right? This is 2013. I enroll, I get accepted, I start taking classes, and I did not like the creative writing courses for me because I had already been writing creatively. I'm a nonfiction creative writer. And while I appreciated it, it felt like overkill for me, right? And I found that I did much better and learned more out of my English literature courses. So halfway through my college journey, I switched tracks to English literature because it had elements of history. You're comparing authors and giving like a new perspective. I don't know. For me, it just fed me more, and I also passed them each year. And so I was like, English literature is where it's at. And they made me read and write my eyeballs out. But, you know, I did it and I had some sort of grounding. And I'm not teaching full time, but that was the original reason for going for it. But yeah.
But then as a rabbit trail, like, then why Masters of Sociology? That's interesting.
Yeah. So I'd always been in the space, in the intersection of arts and culture, right? When I started hosting Dandelion Community Cafe, it was at that venue, Diverse Word, which you mentioned earlier, which I actually no longer host anymore. I need to update my bio. Another artist runs that. I did do it for the first 17 years. So when I started that in 2006, it was just to get around other poets and create a room of diversity around creative expression. And it was just to kind of build my own community around poetry there. What I noticed is that people were starting to really build these strong social bonds as a result of focusing on poetry, right? So while I'm hosting and stuff like that, I'm recognizing that other things socially are happening, right? But I think that was the first layer in my or one of the layers in my interest in sociology later. But I think I've always been interested in people and groups and how they work together and theories around why people work together and why they don't, and that sort of thing. But never, pursued anything serious. My work. One second. Let me. My work with Polis Institute, who I worked for, Phil Hissam, who started that organization, was really meant, by and large, if I could summarize it, meant to minimize the negative impacts of community development. And so as a practitioner in that space, but while also performing and hosting a space, sociology has always been sort of like in the backdrop, but I've never done any actual studies to understand the impacts of performance poetry environments to social impact indicators, right? What do these environments have to do with crime reduction or education? Are people getting smarter? Are they graduating high school more? Does the region matter? All of that stuff, I think, is a gap in knowledge in terms of what poetry actually does socially. And so between that and also, which is a longer story I won't get into now, meeting my biological father for the first time in 2016 and learning about his involvement in sociology, I think helped me understand how I was hardwired. like why I was doing all this community type work, but also being an artist and having an impact that way made me want to pursue my master's in sociology and just see how I can even make a bigger impact with my art form.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me in terms of English literature giving you such a broad view of how expression happens, the culture, the language of sorts, but then the sociological impact, because I love that intersection of arts and culture. I mean, we're big in that too. That's why we're doing this. Tell me your faith journey along this trek.
Yeah. So when I moved out of New York and lived with my aunt in, oh gosh, I forget the year, but I was 8 maybe. So 91, something like that. My aunt introduced me to the Gospels. She was heavy into church. We lived in a poorer area economically and whatnot, and so for safety purposes, I think it was like church home school, like there was no in between, and so and she actually ran a daycare out of her home too, so there was always educational materials in the space where I lived. This is why my mom was looking for a house in Orlando, and I would eventually move it and live with her. So I was in church like 24/7. It just inescapable. And so at the age of 8 years old, as much as I understood it, I gave my life to Jesus and really adopted the philosophies of the teachings of Christ and understood about life after death, and there was a strong push around being righteous, and at my young age I desired that. I wanted to be on the right track and all of that. Now some of that walk became complicated when I moved to Orlando because I had to deal with white supremacy and racism as like the only one of the few black kids in my elementary school, and some of the people that were picking on me were being informed by some of their parents, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So I kind of had to wrestle with like, if I say something, if I curse or I punch back or whatever it is, like, am I sinning? Like there was this kind of inner conflict, like kind of believing that like Jesus was a pacifist, like you don't, you kind of don't, that kind of thing. And so I had to reconcile these realities growing up. And, obviously as I personally matured and started to get even more perspective around what I was experiencing and understanding more of the history of the United States, understanding our African American leaders here that have tried to make things better for Black people in the U.S., I began to kind of understand and get more of a well-rounded perspective and understand how to manage my my existence here.
Yeah, yeah. And your church today is what?
Deeper Fellowship, right on Orange Avenue, is what I call my home church.
Giving a shout out to the pastor there.
Yeah, well, Pastor William McDowell. Deeper Fellowship.
So share with us then how your faith does lead into your spoken word art.
Yeah, I think I had phases. And this will make sense when I understand the kind of stages of my writing. When I first started, it was really just to impress my friends, right? To show them like, oh, I can do this. Like, I'm cool too, right? So it's just a lot of word flipping and not saying it wasn't thought to it, but it was like for the oohs and the ahs, it wasn't necessarily as substantive as it later became, right?
Mm.
Um,
I think a lot of people could
after I,
identify with that.
huh?
I think a lot of people could identify with, why do I do what I do for a living? Well, in some ways, I'm trying to get A's or impress parents or impress others, find myself.
Right, right, right. So initially it was that, and it was like, you get a brand new car and you're like speeding all over the place and doing, the donuts and stuff like that. So that was kind of like, how do I drive this thing? Um, then it transitioned into saying things more substantively. So, late high school, early college, I'm kind of learning about conflicts in the Middle East and these different kind of like social issues that I started to bleed into my writing at, because I think my heart of hearts, I love sharing things that I've learned with people, right? It's kind of like
Mm.
just the educator in me. And so I would use poetry as a medium to share things that I learned, right? So it went from just trying to like impress people to sharing like new things that I learned kind of about the world, but still using rhyme to kind of like communicate that. Um, and then that kind of naturally bled into me wanting people to know what I stood for spiritually, theologically, right? Especially around 2008, this is around the time I got married. Um, I joined my wife's church at the time in Kissimmee, and we were, 24/7, not 24/7, but I was soaking up a lot of the word around that time, and really involved with the church. And you can tell in my writing and my performance how what I was exposed to informed what I was saying, right? So there was a season, I would say, between 2008 maybe to like 2012 ish. A lot of my writing was around my faith, and then I almost kind of not emptied myself of that, but I almost felt like I said all I needed to say, and I, beyond that, I started to tell other people's stories, other people's hardships and other people's overcoming journeys, and I got really into like the storytelling aspect of spoken word.
And
So
this is telling the stories of biblical characters or other people of faith you had encountered.
other people in general, not biblically associated. I'm just saying like other people's stories. So there was a young lady who was sex trafficked for 7 years and got out. Right. I thought her story was important enough to spend time crafting a spoken word poem to share, and I've done that to help raise money for a nonprofit in town called Samaritan Village,
Oh, we
who
love them. We love
has
them.
like anti-human trafficking efforts.
Yeah.
There's the story of Daryl Davis, who has spent much of his life converting former Ku Klux Klan members out of their white supremacist ideology through
Wow.
conversation and,
Wow.
and this sort of thing. There's just amazing story. The Negro Motorist Green Book was a little booklet that was published in the 1930s. And it had listings of all of the safe places that African Americans can go to if they were traveling through the Jim Crow South, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it helped Black folks like navigate to avoid being harassed. And so there's a million inspirational type of stories out there, and I became interested in that. And for me, it really was a way for people to hear things that were biblically aligned,
Hmm.
right? That could still reach the world in a way that they could understand and not necessarily like tune me out, so to speak. So,
Sure.
and I
Sure.
have the more explicitly poems connected to my faith as well. But I try to do more than just talk about Jesus,
Right. Right. Okay. I want others to hear what I've just heard you say. The way in which your faith and connection to your work is an evolving, growing thing. And I mean, I hear these stages of where you said you're just working to impress others to a next stage of sharing my learning about the world. sharing it so others can engage, to a next stage of I want others to know what I stand for, what matters to me. So for listeners, I just want you to make that parallel. How are you, wherever you may serve and work, helping others to know sort of what you stand for? Then you said you had a season of being soaked in the word and it just comes out naturally. And I can imagine water cooler conversations or business meetings or deals, and your principles are stated and seen to come out. Then you're telling other people's stories of suffering and redemption, telling
Mm-hmm.
other people's stories, and then helping the world understand biblical principles and biblical alignment. Dude, that encourages me to think about my faith and work integration, and it grows and evolves and gets more mature.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's yeah, God's just a big God, and I think He just uses people in different ways to accomplish what He wants to accomplish in the earth. And I just try to, do my best to align with whatever that is, and do my best to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit's leading and prompting for me, creative ideas. And at the end of the day, people don't care about what you say. They like care about who you are. Like
Mm,
how do you treat people at the end of the day? Because people pay more attention to that than anything else. And even as a spoken word artist, I say a lot of things, but what I value more is like, what was your experience with me?
that's, that's one thing for a bank executive or a plumber or a stay-at-home parent to say, but for you as a spoken word artist, like that's a pretty bold statement.
I mean, it's true. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm on these big stages and standing ovations and the whole night. Like, it doesn't matter if at the end of the day there's all these like side pocket conversations about how much of a jerk
Mm.
I am. It's like,
Well, I've never heard that. I've never
or
heard that.
or my wife, saying, "Oh, he's great out in the streets, but at home he's a
Mm,
freaking terror."
mhm,
I never
mhm,
want that. Or my kids. So like that stuff matters more to me than the public um, presence of who I am.
mm. Can you share an example of where you just saw godly fruitfulness from your work?
Mm. So the first story that came to mind when you said that was, oh my gosh, and there's been some wild stories. I forget the year, but it would have had to have been after 2010 and before 2015, somewhere in that range. I went to speak at a church. I performed, and afterwards, there was a couple that came to me and said that they'd gotten my CD. I published a CD in 2010 called Stone Soup Poetry is Church for Some. It's on Apple Music. I don't broadcast it as much, but the wife of the husband, or the husband, I don't know which one of them it was, honestly, but they said that they had heard my CD and was surprised to see me here at this church live,
Mm,
and had to share with me that after listening to the CD, they had given their life to the
mm,
Lord,
mm.
and were like, "We never thought we'd be able to meet you," and all this kind of stuff. I was just like, "Wow, uh, I wouldn't have known that." So yeah, that was kind of like encouraging, like, because you don't always see fruit or don't know what the fruit will look like, right? It may
Sure.
not be that, it could be something else, but just it was encouraging for me to know that there's seeds that I'm sort of like planting out there,
Yeah.
and fruit is happening whether I know about it or not. There was another case where this guy bumps into me at a Publix and said that he had bought a car, and the car had my CD in the CD player. And when he heard it, he was like, "Oh, this guy's following this guy." So he ends up getting a job with Phil, who you know,
Oh, I love Phil. Mm-hmm.
at Discovery
Church.
Church, I think he's at
Yeah.
now. And he, the guy that bought the car with the CD in it that had my voice on it, he's telling Phil about me effectively. He's like, "Oh, that's Shawn," and he shows him pictures of me or whatever. And the guy ends up running into me at Publix and tells me this whole story about how he bought a car and it had like an old CD in it or something. But
Yeah.
and he was encouraged by it. Is the fruit, because he was an artist as well and didn't know like what he would do with his talent and this sort of thing. And hearing that and then meeting me was really meaningful. So yeah, there's a few stories out there. I don't know. Actually, you know what? I'll share one more. At the open mic night that I hosted, past tense, there was two artists that met there, Robbie and Mimi. They met there and they ended up becoming a couple and wanted to get married at the same spot where they met.
Is
So
this at Dandelion Cafe?
At Dandelion Cafe. So during our break, we usually have poets perform and then we take a break. During the break, they got a justice of peace and had a wedding ceremony at the open mic, like literally got
That's
married
cool.
at the open mic. Like I created this environment. How cool is that? But that was like, oh my gosh, like it was that meaningful, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And now y'all have, you know, this union. So anyway, I can go on and on. But
we talk a lot here about common grace. It's is different than special grace. So like you talk about people coming to faith through your work. That's a special grace movement of God that's specific to salvation in Christ. But I love also common grace is God's goodness to all people, whether they're believers, God's goodness to society, the public square. And to know, you know, your fruitfulness is also born by raising these issues of racism, raising these issues of telling the story of human trafficking, raising our own appreciation for the beauty in Orlando, like you did a moment ago. So I want folks to know, I mean, that fruit is just as valuable. Well, I say just as valuable. I mean, it's so valuable because it blesses people and it helps lift us as a community.
thank you.
Shawn, could you describe God for us as you perform?
Such a easy question. I'm being sarcastic.
What does he do?
God in one word.
Well, not just God, but like, what is he seeing and feeling and reacting to as you do your spoken word?
So I know that God, by his very nature, is a creator. He's a creator, and in our nature, I believe that we are creative beings as well because we're his children. When I exercise creativity in the world, to me, I mean, I have a unique, you know, kind of a special lane here with spoken word poetry, but to me, it is an extension of of what he values, right? And especially if those words are life-giving, right? I don't know for sure like what God's thinking when I'm performing. I hope that he's pleased, you know, with what I create and what I decide to put out there for the various reasons that I do. But I know God's a creator. He's creative. We have creative elements of us. Some's more amplified than others. But, you know, I have this way of thinking that like we should really, you know, people in general, especially folks in the faith, should really concentrate on what does God want me to do here? You know, I think we spend a lot of attention on whether I'm going to make it to heaven or not, right? And it's kind of like that's the sole and primary focus. And I think there's some error in that type of thinking. I believe that our focus should be, how can I bring heaven on earth, right? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So like, what is heaven? What is the perfect sort of setting? And how can I pull some of that and bring it here during the course of my lifetime, right? And if we focus on what we're like, whatever our assignment is in the world, and I feel like we need to have more of that kind of energy, you know? And we're fulfilled in the process. God's pleased, right? And like, what will happen will happen. Like, Christ has done it all. You know what I mean? So I don't know, from an energy and perspective standpoint, I think we should focus more on that. And so to come back to your question about, what does God think, or what is he feeling ish when I'm performing spoken word poetry? I believe that he's pleased with that, and it's consistent with the way that I think we should, especially people in the faith, should operate.
Wow. Friends, right there. That's the sermon, the heartfelt sharing. So, Shawn, I'm just so grateful that as a deep man of faith, you're out there in so many different venues and so many different listeners who may not be of faith, but boy, they're being blessed. They're being blessed by
Common
fruit.
grace is what you called it.
That's right, baby. Well, so the collaborative went under the umbrella of First Presbyterian Church. We helped to launch Arts Fellowship Orlando, this 6-month fellowship where artists are brought together for discipleship, spiritual formation, and to create wonderful works. And so Shawn came to our performance of these works at the Dr. Phillips Center. And there, you as a guest artist shared a profound spoken word that I believe you did write that specifically for that event.
I did not write it for that event, but it fit nice and snug.
Well, it did fit. And so I've asked Shawn to close us out if he would share that piece.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the poem is called Last Name, and it kind of talks about my last name and the name of the Lord. So I hope you all enjoy. It goes like this. Welcome is my last name. Welcome to Brooklyn, New York, 1989, PS 244, first grade. Every door and doormat had my name. Always felt extra special, but not this day. See, classmate Liberty Brown told me I was gonna die. When I asked her to clarify, she said, yeah, everybody's gonna die. Someday. It was the most shocking news I'd received in all of my 6 years. Tears face painted my face the color of confusion. So like a reporter, I gave Papa the breaking news and he didn't look surprised. Apparently, like my last name, this was common information, but sounded like a revolutionary idea at the time. I wanted to go to my 11-year-old older sister and say, did you know about this? And just like, didn't tell me? What, are we keeping secrets now? From that high point on, questions snowballed and avalanched into what they called the true and living God. I suddenly realized that the big bad wolf was alive, exemplified by Little Red Riding Hood, but clearly understood once I read it in red writing. If this don't make sense, tell me what does. Have you heard of a greater story of love? Seen more power in what is softly said? Listen, gentleness is just as supernatural as raising the dead. Knitting with needle and thread, my God made me out of the fabric of his breath, from a place of rest as he chooses. How many rulers does it take to confuse us? One ruler is 1 foot step closer to the truth, 12 inches towards the light. Let's leave it at that. 12 disciples run the right track. Call me an addict, a fiend for Ben Elohim. There will be an illuminated white horse in a broken sky, saddled by a mighty rider whose blood pumps forgiveness. We all need transfusions. I want to be transformed and transfigured so you can't figure out the difference. I'm talking about immortality being attached to me as a tractor is to a trailer. What good are my goods if I'm not going anywhere? Give me another name. The name that is above all names, top of the food chain, king of the jungle, lion of Judah. Don't depend on your war horse to save you. This earth age will fade away like pagers. No longer exists like the milkman. I mean, when's the last time you seen the milkman? This earth will no longer be relevant in a million years, maybe another 80 for you and I. Yes, both me and this earth will die. So why should I believe in either of them? Oh, wretched man that I am, where are the Liberty Browns? I'm sounding the alarm. His name is above every name, rules above every game. Over Jehovah rules and reigns more than a last name. I want a name that'll last from everlasting to everlasting. Rather be radically wrong in Christ than write my own self-righteous thesis. Jesus. The most controversial person to parade the planet from his immaculate entrance to his amazing ascension. His name transcends dimensions. It's not unknown. The real issue is, how bad do we want to know? Change my song. Shred our wrongs into confetti, so when death is ready, the sound of a savior is saying, welcome home.
Wow. I'm weeping. Shawn, wow. Friends, go and learn more and enjoy Shawn's work. Dude, thank you. Thank you so much.
And my pleasure.
You are a blessing. So tell us where folks can engage more with you, either online or in upcoming events.
Yeah, so if people are interested in having me come out, they can go to ShawnWelcome.com, ShawnWelcome.com, and fill out, a request form there. My email is simple, info@ShawnWelcome.com. One of the things are service offerings that I've been pushing a lot lately, because it's just good for me and for the people asking for it, is these custom performances that I would draft. And there's a separate website for that called brandgenius.studio. So I'll give an example. Or the Orange County Convention Center is having a global pet expo. And
my daughter will be there, I promise you.
Okay. Well, I wrote a poem about the connection between the human-animal bond, and that's a client that I've worked with. So different things like that. Brandgenius.studio for custom content creation. But I'm easy to find. Just Google Shawn Welcome and you can find me. Or reach out to Dr. Case Thorpe.
Well, y'all go learn more and engage with this wonderful art and artist. So, friends, thank you for joining us today. Please like and share. It really helps us to get the word out, and we want others to be blessed by this spoken word for sure. Leave a review wherever you get your podcast. Come see us at collaborativeorlando.org for even more content, podcasts, blogs, and you can find us across the social media platforms. Be sure to tune in to Nuance Form to Faithfulness, this 10-minute devotional. I hope that it's a blessing for your heart, because we want to form ourselves well for the public square. I want to thank our sponsor today, the Magruder Foundation. I'm Case Thorpe, and we'll see you next time.